I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please, first order is to approve the minutes of our last meeting on June 20th.
Motion approved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I think we can just say aye because
Nobody else is
Michaela's not on.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. We have also attending, it looks like Patty. Can you say hello? Oh, good. And Joanne? Joanna, is that you? Hi there, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see you guys.
We, Patty, are you going to show your face? Joanna?
I'm sorry, I'm doing work.
Hello.
Hi, Joanna. Great. Okay.
I'm watering the garden, sorry.
All right. That's okay. Terrific. Nice to see you all. We are spending this morning, we're having a special meeting in order to work further on our presentation for the community housing. And Jan, I'd like to turn the meeting over to you.
Turn your audio off. Or close the window.
We're going to put up the slides. In the meantime, just as a quick update for your benefit, Joanna, Michael was in here. Have we made any progress, Joanna, getting the approval from Construct?
I think Michael was going to handle that. He was, last I heard, or I spoke to him, he was going to email Jane Rolfe from Construct about getting explicit permission from her. So I don't know what the status of that is. I'm hoping to find out that myself.
Okay, very good. Well, it's moving along. Patrick, did the selectmen vote to allocate the 30,000?
We did, but that's on the agenda today. I think we should deal with that.
Okay, just, but since Joanna's here. Okay, Jan, you're in charge. Okay. So,
Do we have copies of the slides for everyone or no?
No, this is gonna be
If you give
it.
me them, I'll go make a copy so you all can be looking at it.
Do you have the final version from last night? No.
I do, but I have it all marked up.
Okay, never mind.
Here, I can set up my computer
Can you put
and
it
I
on
have
here
it,
or share?
yeah, and I can just sit here, but
And share that one.
I have a written
Put it
copy.
in display mode. You know, the big screen mode, slideshow. Top. Wait, yeah, click in here and go slideshow. There,
Okay,
Good.
all right.
and you're gonna go way to the end.
Yeah.
Hit the down arrow.
Yeah. So what we hoped to do today was, we have had a number of changes to the materials we went over at the last meeting in order to simplify them and really zero in on what the data is saying and make sure that we are clear. So the set of slides we're going to go through very quickly this morning would be the set that we're proposing to use for the community housing workshop a week from Monday. And then at the end of that discussion, I hope to have a discussion among the group about what are the takeaways from this in terms of the housing priorities for the town. You'll remember in the last presentation, there were 3 or 4 slides at the end of that, which covered what Karen Sonnenberg, our consultant, was suggesting as the priority housing needs coming out of the analysis. But I think what we need to do is go through and discuss what our takeaway is on all of that for Stockbridge. And then put that in as part of the process.
I can see those faces.
So let me just run through these very quickly. If anybody has questions, you can ask. So first of all, the purpose of the housing production plan, there are really 4 things: to understand the local data about housing and the situation of the economics in the town, to identify what the needs are, to prioritize strategies for meeting those needs, and then to create a path forward. The current housing, we have 113 affordable residences in the 3 areas shown here. Overall, we have 1,638 homes, 85% of them built before 1980. of the 1,638, we have 811 that are full-time resident homes. Stockbridge already exceeds the 10% affordable guidelines.
What's the
So,
source of those last two pieces of data?
I'm sorry,
What's the source of the last two pieces of data?
the 811,
And 1638.
those are census information.
Okay. You might have just mentioned that
Okay.
because it's a little at odds with our internal numbers.
What does that mean, Patrick?
I think Michael Blay has indicated there's 1,695 residential homes in Stockbridge. But once again,
Residential or just homes?
what?
Residential homes or homes? Because we're talking about full-time residents.
No, the 1638 includes all homes.
Right.
Right.
And I would just we can talk to him after the meeting, but I would just,
Who is he, Patrick?
he's the assessor.
The assessment.
Oh, okay. So what,
Anyway, we don't need to drill down now because we're trying to go to the end slides, but we're just putting an asterisk next to that one.
Okay. The resident population has declined over the last 10 years or so. The median age has increased significantly since 2010. So it was at that point 41, now it's 60 for the median resident age.
that's a significant change
That is a significant change.
in 10 years.
And we have limited but increasing racial diversity.
How do we, that census data, do we have
This
any
is all
numbers?
census. This is all census data.
Okay, but do we have any numbers on the racial stuff?
Yes, there are some we could put in here.
Right, okay.
Just have.
There's also a declining student population in Stockbridge. We have data for 1990 all the way through 2022. The projection for 2023 and 2030 is looking at the age of the current students and then assuming they continue, some graduate over time. So it may be that it goes down that much, but there could be people who move out of town in the next 7 years, or people who move into town. So
Yeah, the 2023 numbers based on the superintendent's count estimate for the coming school year.
okay.
And that's a consistent number with your work?
Well, I asked him for the number, yeah.
Okay.
He said it was going to be between 106 and 108, and so we went with 107.
Compromise.
As we mentioned 2 slides ago, the median age has increased, and you can see that the range between 35 and 55 is what has gone down significantly. So the younger population has gone down some, the older population has really increased, and the middle age, if you will, population has really declined over this last 10 years.
Jen, excuse me, but on the back, going back just one slide, do you think we should add there that the percent of the children of the 80, not 80, but 107, no, 111 is what we have right now? Right?
We could add the data label for the percentages. Basically drop from over 10 to around 5.
That would
So
be
you were
good, but
suggesting that we add 2 more bars to that next slide that are the school-age children?
no, I have a totally different point, which is the percent of the children of our town who live in Pine Woods.
We don't have that, I don't have a timeline for
22%.
that data.
But we don't have it on a timeline, no.
We don't have a timeline on that.
No, but today, right now,
I think it's something you can
22%.
talk to in the slide.
you don't want to put it on there?
No, I think the slides are looking good. I think.
Okay.
So moving right along, what you also see on the economic front is that people who have earned less than 25,000, the number of people in that category has increased over the past 10 years, 11 years. The population that earns more than 150,000 has also increased significantly. And the population that earns between 50 and 100 has really declined. So the middle income part of the population is much lower now than it used to be. And people at the very low end are higher and at the very high, and at the high end are higher.
Just a suggestion, this may be easier to understand if we translate that to a chart.
Okay.
We also have, in the housing inventory, we have a slow growth over the last 10 years. So right now, as I said before, we have 1,638 housing units. That's only 40 more than existed in 2010. And roughly half are full-time and half are part-time residents. Very low vacancy rates, both on rental and on home ownership. Recent prices, and this information comes from.
I have a question, Jan, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Just on the prior slide, with 40 units have been added since 2010, even though the population's been declining.
Yes,
So does that include, the 40 units include second homeowners?
Yeah.
yes, it would.
Every house.
Is that probably where most of that is, do you think? I mean, it's,
Well, it doesn't, I'll go back and look at the data, but I don't think it shows, the data shows that there are more second homeowners now than there were in 2010.
okay,
In fact, it shows that there are slightly fewer.
yeah.
But that data is not really consistent with, one of the things that Liz and I did recently was to look at for the sales over the last 2.5 years or so in all of Stockbridge. And you find that there are more sales to what I'm going to term second homeowners or part-time residents, on the assumption that if they're listing with the assessor, their address as California or New York or somewhere and not Stockbridge, that they're second homeowners. So what you see is that in the last couple of years, you have more people buying in the part-time resident category and fewer in Stockbridge buying.
As a full-time.
The median prices are a little bit higher for second homeowners, but not significantly. But the range is also between the lowest and the highest. The range is wider for second homeowners than for residents.
Just, it might be better if you want to actually cross-reference and get the data, I would cross-reference it to the voter list, which we have done, rather than looking at post office boxes that can easily be forwarded. You know, I don't know that just because somebody listed as Stockbridge doesn't necessarily mean they're not forwarding their mail when they're not here. That's what.
I was looking at deeds too.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, that's good. And the deed is what?
It is when it closes, it shows where their residence is.
And the other point I would just make is many people that we know start, one of the reasons that stabilizes the full-time residential population is because a lot of people start off as second homeowners and decide it's so great here that they are going to actually make this their primary home. And so even if some of the new purchases were second homeowners, that's offset by people deciding to make this their main home.
Right, and then their tax bill would be sent to Stockbridge.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I
thought you were sick.
I'm trying to
He's
focus
doing
on this.
very, very well.
Focused on that. Spent hours with it, I remember.
Okay, so to come back to this, the median price in 2022 for house sales in Stockbridge was 575,000.
We're not going to use the 715?
That was 2021. So for this, which is looking at the affordability, the analysis that Karen did and so on used the 575, which is the most recent information about.
So, I mean, that's pretty extraordinary to drop 200,000, not 200, but 100.
How many sales are we talking about each year?
30, 40 in that way.
Each year?
There were 85 sales in 2021 to July 1st, 2023.
21 to 23.
2.5 years.
Yeah, so 2.5 years.
There are 85 sales.
One of which was sold twice.
Do we back out the seasonal ones or no? Or do we have a way to do that?
Well, that's what we were looking at, and that's what.
Yeah. All right, we're good. The numbers are the numbers. It's fine.
Well, I think, though, we need some consistency in presentation because we use 715 on another slide coming up.
This is the most recent information.
Right, this
So
is-
if we want to,
She was basing it on the census, wasn't she?
yeah.
This is now including what's happened in the last couple of years with COVID and people leaving cities and.
So the price went down with, I mean,
And
it
keep
went up.
in mind,
Well, depending on-
715, which was the 2021 number, was way up from the 2020 number, way up, probably in part because of the demand.
Right, and
everything.
we were selling things that we couldn't sell before at exorbitant prices because people had cash and they're like, "Send it out."
And it's likely that, maybe there were a couple more condos or relatively.
And there were some very large sales.
Yeah.
Some very, very large sales, which will
Yeah.
skew.
Either way, the larger point doesn't matter if it's 575 or 750.
Well, it does on the next one.
But it,
Because when you start doing the ratios between income and sales price.
so do you drop at 10?
What just happened to that?
Okay,
What just happened to it?
It disappeared.
well, we should pick the number that most represents the general condition. And if 575 is the best number,
I would certainly go with the more recent.
okay.
Let's see what I did.
Hit share again. From Zoom.
Sorry.
You're up there.
We are not trained.
Okay.
And then go to slideshow play.
Hattie just sent,
No,
What was
it
that?
was a thumbs up for the prices at 575.
Slideshow.
I don't see slideshow.
1, 2 over. Top row.
Oh, right there, right.
There you are.
See, there you are.
Slideshow. Up.
There you go.
Click.
That says annotate on mine, but okay.
Next to annotate.
Do you want to help?
Yeah.
Yeah, see where it says, this thing. This is the way. You gotta click on this so we see the right screen. And
Okay. Thank you.
should we start over?
No.
there we go.
So what this is saying is that to buy what was the median priced house in 2022, if you assume that you put 20% down and take a mortgage, it would require an income of $148,000 in order to be paying less than 30% of your income.
Right. Did you, just a question, what was the mortgage rate based on at that time? Because it seems to be creeping back up, I noticed today.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and ask Karen
Okay.
on that, what she assumed.
I have a question about the two-family. Because it's such a dramatic thing to go down to 62,000. And I'm trying to picture, let's say the second unit in the house gets 2,000 a month in rent. That's 24,000 a year added to the 62, you're only up to 86,000.
It's not, the 24 is going toward the 30% portion of
Right.
your income for housing costs, not the 100% of your income. So in other words, the 24 can be completely dedicated by the bank to the mortgage nut.
Right.
That's why what's left of the mortgage nut is what's based, the 62,000 is based on.
Okay.
Exactly.
So none of that 24 goes in the pocket of the owner, it goes right to the bank?
Well, I'm just saying, it's how the bank calculates whether you can afford the home, yeah. And if somebody were doing a short-term rental rather than a long-term rental, which we don't necessarily want, but the numbers might even be different from here.
Still doesn't make sense to me.
We also know that for a number of residents, it is becoming difficult for covering the housing costs. So we know 1 in 3 right now spends more than 30% of their income, and 1 in 8 spends more than 50% of your income. And I think it's important to talk about where this data comes from. So this is from the HUD survey, which is done. They take a small sample of individuals who are residents in the town, send them a questionnaire and ask how much they are spending on housing costs. So one of the things to be mindful in this is Stockbridge is a small town. The sample would be a small sample. So whether this is really
Valid.
fully representative, I
And
think
valid.
is and valid is, it's indicative, but I don't know that it's fully, depends on the sample size.
The other big thing is that was it done when interest rates were 2% and 3% or when it was what they are now, 6%?
Well, this was done in 2021 and
This, oh,
yeah.
Lower.
Yeah. A standard deviation might be at 10 or 15% is the point. The size of the data set is so small that you're going to have a higher standard deviation.
Exactly.
but it's also at current interest rates, these numbers, I think, will be higher.
No, we don't know. The point is, this is HUD data and, you can qualify it.
I do
But
find
it
it
makes a-
interesting based on the last slide, that the needed income for the purchase is very close to that significantly increased number that you showed a couple of slides ago on income,
Yes,
the $150,000.
yeah.
So,
And what it basically is saying is that for roughly 70% of the resident population, they would not be able to technically afford what is the median priced house if they were out to buy it in 2022.
That's frightening. Okay.
Awful lot of people are buying all cash.
Yeah. So this is the slide you were talking about, Randy, that.
Yes,
that,
yeah.
We can see from this that the house price has gone up dramatically. The 715 is the 2021
Number.
median house price for sale. And
mine certainly hasn't.
but at the same time, the income, and this is not adjusted for inflation, so the income has gone down in real dollars and
Right.
in absolute dollars.
I would be more comfortable if we went with the 575 number here, not the 715 number.
Right. And just change it to 2022.
Just change it, the median income is going to be about the same, or we could say 21, 22, and the speaker can explain it. But, I think it's really important that, because for some of the points we're making, the 715 number makes the point better, and I don't want
Right.
it to be, there be a perception that we're cooking it.
And it's not changing the perception that we
Yeah,
the resident
bad.
afford to.
575 is bad enough.
Okay,
So we should adjust that.
Yeah.
so if we could just summarize for a moment what we've seen in the needs assessment data. What we're seeing is a slow housing production. Remember, only 40 units in 10 years, 11 years. We're seeing an imbalance of housing supply and demand that's driving up prices. I'm sure, that price increase is being seen all over the country, so it's not unique to Stockbridge by any means. But
And
it's
worse
still-
in communities that are attractive for
Exactly.
tourist destinations.
Right.
I mean, I just saw an article that the Hamptons now have exceeded Tokyo and New York
Wow,
and Paris in terms of housing prices,
wow.
median housing prices.
And caterers are expensive there too, I hear.
What's that?
And caterers are expensive there too.
Yeah,
See all
exactly.
the parties in the paper.
We should go into catering.
And we also know that the rising housing prices are leading to higher affordability gaps and cost burdens, meaning the amount of your income that you have to put toward housing, paying for
Yeah,
housing.
Nantucket's worse. It was just a $38 million estate that was sold, waterfront estate sold, highest price ever in Nantucket.
Okay.
And is that Joe's house? Joe McHale's house? No?
No, it was Jones, some hedge fund person, sold it. I don't know.
Okay, so this would be, that set of slides is what we're suggesting we use for the housing workshop.
Yeah.
If there are any further changes anyone wants to suggest, will need to let me know what those are going forward. And then what I hoped we might do for the rest of the time here is, based on all of that information, to talk about what that's saying we think the housing needs are for the community. So I've listed these as a series of questions in an effort to try to get some discussion going about whether this is something we think should be a priority housing need for Stockbridge. So the first one would be to look at creating housing options that would be possible for adults in the 30 to 50 age range and middle income, with or without children. But because remember, we saw that there's a significant decrease in that population. And so
I think the word create suggests municipal. And I think what we want to do is align, encourage, facilitate. I mean, really, we have really two questions where we can take action. One is, the town in conjunction with this board can actually facilitate the building of stuff. And the other is the town can align its laws to allow the private sector to build stuff. And I think we want to make sure that we're talking about a solution that encompasses both of those, not suggesting that we need to,
Do the building ourselves.
You want a word like prioritize?
Facilitate, I think.
Yeah.
I think facilitate works.
Yeah, and
Because that encompasses anything that either the select board or
I don't think we're at the
board or anybody else needs to do to modify things, in addition to anything that we can do from a fundraising perspective that could facilitate, the more inventory.
I think it's sort of the bookend strategy. It's like people at the relatively early stage of their life, if they're looking to buy their first home or a larger home because they've decided to start a family, that's one side of the equation. And the other side of the equation is we have an aging population. And I saw a federal study that suggested that while most people want to age in place, something like 12% will not need nursing care, but will not be able to age in place. And that ability to downsize, when it's 1 out of 8 on average, we've got 1,000 people 60 or over who are full-time residents, and probably an equal population of second homeowners.
Probably so.
And both groups may want to age in place in a downsized place. And some of the smaller second homes, if they're in certain neighborhoods, might be that place already. But, looking at kind of policies and approaches that really meet an expanded need for downsizing and an expanded opportunity for the young, I think that bookend strategy is maybe how we frame that here.
I think there's no question that however it gets created, there needs to be housing that can be purchased by that middle group of people who are starting families or growing families. Or
That middle, the middle.
the middle 30 to 50 age.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, that's that is one end, because, if they're 30 to 50 with family, then there's kids there too. So it's like that range of people who are young and that range of people who are retired. We got kind of, yeah.
But that,
On this list, I'm just looking at it and I'm wondering whether we need these active words of create, facilitate, identify. What if you just said priority housing needs? Housing for adults 30 to 50 and middle income with or without children, housing for seniors who may want to downsize, funding options for seniors who need renovations.
And
I mean, those are the priorities without having to necessarily
Without the verb.
punch with the verbs.
yeah. And then the question I have for the group is, 30 to 50 is great, but there are many folks in the 18 to 30 range who are able to, who might be interested in tiny housing, for example. You know, where they're clearly singles or even couples, but not so much families, and where a 500 to 800 foot house, you know, in a tiny house community might make a lot of sense in terms of addressing one of the drivers to, you know, kind of the sort of fleeing younger population is there's no place that they can afford that they can live. And if you I think that you know, a lot of folks talk about kind of the opportunity for jobs as the reason why young folks don't stay here. And I would argue that that if you live in Newton, certainly West Newton, if you live in on the North Shore and the South Shore, you're looking at easily a 45-minute to an hour commute. And from a 45-minute commute from here, you can get to Albany. You can get to jobs in the Springfield area in an hour commute. And I think that to the degree that we make housing available, then folks will see an opportunity to, rather than, you know, move to, Dorchester, the western suburbs or whatever, to work a job in the greater Boston area, like many of us did. There's an opportunity to maybe, create more opportunity by having the opportunity for housing. And I guess the point I'm making is I don't want to write off the idea of like an overlay zone or some kind of, or special permit based, tiny house community. I think that that's something that would really help young people in this area.
Does this need another line, do you think, or maybe change the age?
Isn't that a different
25?
idea?
It is a different idea, because I think we're talking about young families in the first one. We're talking about the need to downsize or have like live-in help on the second one, or the second and third, so on the second and third one. And I think that I think we should be at least thinking about whether we should encourage that third group,
Well, don't you think, obviously, we want to encourage all people. We're not
Yeah, but
really
then,
targeted.
right.
So I think we should add another line on 18 to
Well, I have-
24.
Yeah, I have more slides. I have more lines.
Okay.
So let me get to those. So this would also, and we can take out the verbs again, but housing for community workers.
What does that mean? Is that,
It's an attempt to change workforce, because workforce,
You mean community or seasonal?
no,
I would
No.
say both.
Community, like,
policemen, firemen, librarians,
Teachers.
Yeah.
people who,
because for a number of people who would work in Stockbridge, they can't really afford to buy a house in this market, maybe in the past.
Or rent,
well,
for that matter.
do you want to say municipal workers or
They're not necessarily.
not necessarily?
We may see some proposals on this end this year, but they're not fully baked yet. But I think that's a great thing to talk about, is how, we can't have people commuting an hour and a half to work here. So I think that the larger question is, how do you create incentives, and they would need to be financially based, for folks who want to live in the community and work in municipal government or the district government. Teachers are municipal workers.
Well, you might also, in the first thing we were talking about, of the 30 to 50 age group, middle income, that would also, be creating housing for the community, for the workforce.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking not so much about housing creation as about how we think about municipal income, but I don't really want to say any more on that. There's 13 employees of the school system who live in Stockbridge, and there are approximately 7 town employees who live in Stockbridge.
Out of? How many teachers?
I don't know, 13 school district employees, I have the list.
Okay, no, but how many
What's in a
total?
denominator?
How many?
Yeah.
Oh, easily well over 100. I mean, I have no idea, but it's a $30 million, budget. So you got to believe it's a couple hundred employees. I would think. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think if the 13 were splitting that amount of money, they wouldn't have problems affording a house here.
What?
If the 13 were splitting all
Oh,
that
yeah,
money,
yeah.
they wouldn't have problems affording a house.
We have teachers unions, but they're not that.
You said how many municipal workers live in town?
I believe it's something like 6 or 7.
How many, 6 or 7?
And how
Out of
many
how
do it?
many?
How many municipal workers?
30 or 40. I'll get those numbers for real.
Thank you.
I think those ratios tell an important story.
Yeah.
We can get the real number.
And even if and all these can be part of, I think that as some information comes out during the spoken part of the session, it makes it more interesting than just reading along with the slides. So these are the kind of facts we can control down in the next 10 days.
And then how to leverage local investment with state and federal subsidies. And if you'll remember from Karen's analysis, she was suggesting we focus a lot on rental properties because of this, because a lot of the state and federal funding is focused on rental properties.
Are we looking at rental properties that are big groups, or are we looking at personal, people in town renting properties?
Well, I think that's the question. And are we even looking at rental because, or
Right.
are we focused more on homeowners?
Right, and I think that the turn right now is that rentals are becoming more,
Expensive.
well, not just expensive, but also something that they're looking more and producing more of,
Yeah.
because it's more affordable if
Okay.
the right people doing it. But then there are a lot of laws that are making people go, I don't want to rent my house.
Families and ADUs that are owner occupied both would drive some portion of the rental market. Be it sort of seasonal rentals, long-term rentals, affordable rentals. And Lee Davis, has that proposal in Great Barrington that we should take a look at where if an owner kept it within the affordable guidelines in terms of pricing that the town of Great Barrington would give them a tax break on the property as an incentive. So that requires a home rule petition, but if she's going to file it, there's no reason if we liked it, we couldn't see if the town had any interest in joining in and filing it as a 2-town thing or a 3-town thing or whatever. So she might be a really good person for somebody on our board. I mean, I've talked to her, but in terms of somebody kind of exploring whether, a tax incentive to create affordable housing rentals for an owner makes sense as a policy for the town. I don't know. I know that's something they're looking at Great Barrington.
Okay, Lee Davis is,
She's a selectman in Great Barrington and works at Construct as her job.
she's
And I
the
don't think,
developer.
while it's important to focus on purchase and ownership, I don't think, that we should not play up the rental side of things.
Yeah.
I mean, there are countries like Japan where almost no one owns their home. Everybody's a renter.
Yeah.
Just because they don't want to tie up all that capital in the purchase price. And so I think that that's certainly a potential viable option.
Yeah.
If we can create affordable rentals.
Yeah, and I think with incentives, we might be able to pull it off. In the absence of incentives, most property owners have been gravitating toward the highest cash flow, obviously. That's why we've got 150 short-term rentals on the market this very second in Stockbridge and almost no long-term rentals, just because like you own a piece of property and you got to pay your mortgage. And of course, if they're allowed, we rent them. And then the second biggest thing right now, if it's not short-term rental, is the seasonal month-to-month rental, where you can make more in 3 months than you'll make in 2 years in the long-term rental market. So we just have to realize that is the economic profile of the town. So, rentals outside of building affordable housing strike me as less likely, not impossible, but less likely, yeah.
But it is true that all of the tax credits and the incentives that are available at a state and federal level are only good for rentals. So
That's not true. Habitat for Humanity got a $500,000 hookup for the Great Barrington project as a Mass-Works grant. They got all the infrastructure paid for so they could then go and build those houses.
right, but the typical, to actually build the house, the structures, they need to be rentals. Most of the tax credits are the most significant.
But I would just once again go back to because of the interest rate rise and because the homes have to be sold at a lower rate, they've actually also gotten some state money to close that gap for the ones they just rolled out down at, what was it called? Wind Chime Tower.
Windflower?
Yeah, I think the one that they just launched. Look, I think it's all the above. I personally,
Those are rentals, the wind.
but the other one that Habitat's building,
North Plain,
Grove Street.
And that's on, North Plain Road.
North Plain Road, it's
Yeah.
20 units of freestanding homes.
Yeah, and those are Habitat,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
and those are going to be home ownership.
Yeah.
So we could say that state and federal tax credits are more easily available for
Yeah.
rentals. We could put it that way. Okay.
Or,
And I just feel like on these sites in general, staying away from the mechanics of how we actually get it done. It's more important to talk about kind of what we want to be, I think, than sort of like putting up a barrier. Well, we can only do this because, our inside take is, some of these could take years to put together and we may, I think we should be exploring what our options are, is I guess my point. And as doors close, doors open, and do the best we can.
So when you get to the next one, create more affordable housing. We take out create, but what do we say?
Well, here I was meaning affordable under the technical definition of subsidized housing.
Okay.
And I know you want to expand that. I don't really see the argument for expanding further the technical affordable housing in the community at this point, based on the data from the housing needs assessment. But I'd be interested in what everyone else says.
what you mean by that is a Pine Woods kind of, we don't need
Additional
affordable,
under the technical definition. of
right, that
affordable.
where it has to meet 80% of the
Yeah.
AMI, yada, yada, yada.
Why do we feel we don't need that?
Well, one, we're already over the 10% threshold. And two, if we do expand it, so it's 10% of the entire housing inventory, which you mentioned before, then effectively what you're going to have is 20% of the residents in Stockbridge would be living in technically affordable housing, not paying taxes, because they don't pay taxes in those rental units, right? And so it would increase the tax base overall for Stockbridge to do that.
And what would the tax base would increase because of?
No, it won't increase.
Because right now you don't have,
Sorry, the tax burden, I think you meant not base. The base is people paying in taxes. Tax base wouldn't change. All the houses we currently have would continue to pay the taxes they pay.
But Pine Woods doesn't pay tax, does it?
I understand that. But the point I'm making is that the tax base is currently paid by the existing housing stock. If we add 30 units of affordable housing, it has no impact on the existing housing stock or neither the rate nor.
No, Patrick, that's not right, because 22% of the children in our town are in the subsidized housing. So you're going to raise the number of children in the school system.
No, you'll save less. You won't raise more. The whole point is that we're losing kids and we've been losing them for 50 years. And if we want to stabilize that around 100 kids, we better figure out how you get folks who have kids in the town. Now, if we don't care about stabilizing, the personal goal of mine is that we don't lose any more. I'm not thinking we ever get back to 350 like it was when I was a kid, but the idea that it goes down to 30 or 40, I find abhorrent, frankly.
Well, the town won't survive.
It
How does the
won't
town survive?
I'll try my point again. My point is that we want to provide housing where families with children can come here who are paying taxes.
I don't care about the last qualifier. Hopefully they'll pay.
How are you going to pay, how are you going to continue to pay for the children if the children come here in housing that doesn't pay tax?
Because,
You'll have to raise the taxes on everybody else.
no. Okay, so just, let's look at the math of pre-K through 12 right now. There's 14 classes. The graduating class of seniors at Monument this year was especially large, of 13 kids from Stockbridge. They just graduated, right? In 7 through 12 this year, including those 13, there were 61 kids. In 1 through 6 this year, there were 36 kids. All right. So if we just kind of keep that trend, if we assume that those 1 through 6, when they get to 7 through 12, instead of being 36, we have 25, because that has been the trend for 50 years. And I'm assuming the trend is going to keep going, but looking at these numbers. Then what the in effect that does is it continues to lower the tax burden, because we have a doing nothing is a policy. And if by doing nothing, we will continue to reduce the tax burden, because we will have nearly no kids here. And we pay something called foundation enrollment. On the school budget, there's 2 assessments that the town gets. One is the capital assessment, and that's based on equalized values, which means that if you have high property values, you pay more. And Stockbridge has really high property values in aggregate. So we pay way more, for example, than West Stockbridge pays or Sheffield would pay if we merge, because our values are so high. That all is only, though, about 15 or 18% of the entire school budget, that capital budget. The other 80% is based on foundation enrollment, which is literally the head count of the number of kids in the school. All right. So this is one of the things that this town needs to talk about in a master plan, because it is not an unreasonable strategy for someone to say, I like being a retirement community because that's how we keep our taxes lowest. That's absolutely true. If you go from 100 kids to 30 kids, that foundation enrollment is going to be 70 kids less, and that works out to like 40 grand a kid. You'll save $2 million in taxes, $3 million in taxes. Now, on the other hand, if you have policies which completely focus on filling the town with young people, in that sort of baby making stage of their life or whatever, then you might, in a situation where having it go from 100 to 150 would have a significant impact on the tax system. In Sheffield and in Egremont, 70 or 80% of the tax bill goes to schools. In Stockbridge, it's only about 30 or 35%. So this is a balancing act that has to be, I think, driven by not only kind of what kind of town do we want to be, but also by a pragmatic look at the financials of the town, because we got to do some planning here around what's enough, what would be too much, and kind of what is sort of crazy low,
So Patrick, it's also that the very first thing we had on here was to encourage or facilitate more housing in the middle income bracket. That middle age from 30 to 50 is when there would be children in a number of families, not every family, but a number of families. But the distinction there is that we would try to identify housing options that people could afford, but not be affordable in the technical term. So
The 2 family strategy.
So to your whole point right now about expanding the number of children in town or keeping the level.
Joanne, she has a point she wants to make.
No further.
Oh, Joanna, or did you want to speak?
Let her finish.
I'm finished.
Talking?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were finished. Forgive me.
No, so my point was that you don't, it doesn't require you doing affordable in the technical affordable.
We have no
housing
requirement to, yes, right.
to accomplish what you wanted to do of having more families, more people in that middle income.
I think we should acknowledge, Jan, that some or most of these strategies may not work. Because this is a tough nut to crack. If this was easy, everybody would be doing it. And I think we have to be cognizant of what our zoning is and what some unintended consequences of it are. But we also have to be cognizant of the fact that that we're in a high housing crisis for single moms and others who are going to need housing. And these are folks who work and contribute and play vital parts in our community. And having expanded our options for them is just the reality that we find ourselves in. There isn't anything for people to live in that is even affordable in Pittsfield, let alone in Stockbridge. And I think it's all of the above personally. But you're right, we have absolutely no obligation to go above the 10% that we find ourselves in because of the fluke of ownership, where we that is, you look at ARPA money, we got a lot less than Lee because, our census population as a percentage of total population is so low. But when you look at something like that 10% number, that works to the town's advantage. It gives us more options, but it doesn't mean that we should limit ourselves to what is legally required. But that's a philosophical discussion. I think that I'm not necessarily right. We need to have it as a town.
Well, we're hoping that some of that will come up.
Yeah.
When we have the workshop. Forgive me, Jen, I didn't mean to interrupt you at all, which was simply, I think Jen and I were making the very same point, which is if you choose to have, I'm going to use the word subsidized housing, such as Pine Woods, a community like that, if your goal is to create another one of those subsidized communities, we're going to achieve more children and more families, and but they aren't going to contribute to the tax base, and they are going to contribute to the cost base. So I think that we need, my personal view is that we need a mix, that we need some subsidized housing, we need some community workforce housing, and we need some market rate housing.
And let me just make one last point, and then, because Senator is waiting. I think when we talk about public policy, it's very important we take a macroeconomic approach and avoid terms like would contribute to the cost of the town. The thing is that we're not focused on, and I think this was lost in some of the conversations we had last year, and some of that was my fault. I fully understand. When we talk about neighborhoods or communities or groups of folks or whatever, we're not talking about individuals and how they might impact. What I want to think about is from a macro sense, do we want to articulate a goal for a certain number of population of full-time residents? I mean, we've seen it hover between 2,000 and 2,400 for a whole lot of time, and now it looks like it's dropping again. We see the demographics. It's an aging community. I've seen some projections that it could go under 1,000 in 10 or 15 years. Do we want to have a goal as a town to maintain a certain number of humans who live here year round? Do we want to have a goal in the town to have a certain percentage of those humans be children? We're not talking about, if that's a goal, that's independent of whether they pay taxes or not. I hope, because it comes with,
But I think it's important to talk about the full range of impacts, because there, as you said, there are some decisions that have been made quite a few years ago that had some unintended or perhaps intended consequences that we now face with, our aging population here.
Yeah. I just like talking about kind of, the community in aggregate on a macro sense. And I embrace the idea that if having multi-generational representation in town is important, we might want to kind of be having several irons in the fire, because we'll be lucky if one or two of them plays out.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Joanna, speak up.
Hi, thanks so much. So one thing I wanted to add to this discussion that I really would like you guys to consider, coming from a tenant standpoint, as a person living in affordable housing in Pinewoods, one part of the discussion that I really think should be discussed is the fact that we need housing that is affordable, are not rentals. So for example, the project over on North Plain Farm Road, the Habitat project, I've gone to several of those meetings in the Great Barrington Housing Authority, where they've been discussing that project. I've gone there to represent some of the tenants, myself included, who who are outgrowing Pinewoods, right? We've been living at Pinewoods, raising our families, but we're also thinking about, we'd like to own a house. I mean, home ownership is something that we all aspire to. And when we get to the point where, in our jobs, our careers, we're making enough money where we can actually do that, that kind of project is probably our only option. So I really wish Stockbridge would think about purchasing a piece of land to do a similar type of project, because one thing that's not being talked about here is that there needs to be movement in and out of Pinewoods, right? Pinewoods is, almost like a good starting point for a lot of families, but when you outgrow it, we don't have anywhere to go. If we had a project like that in Stockbridge, where I could, buy a standalone home, a smaller standalone home on a in a similar type of community as Pinewoods, but instead of rentals, they're homes. And I'm not talking about, duplexes, because I don't agree with, I don't want to, my goal is not to own a home that I have to share a wall with another family, because I have no control over who buys the other side, right? And I already have that here at Pinewoods. I have a duplex. I essentially have a townhouse where I share a wall with somebody. So if I'm going to put myself on the hook for a couple $100,000 for my own home, I'm certainly not going to purchase a duplex. So and originally the Habitat for Humanity argued to have standalone units, because they've been doing this for years. And what they've found is that there are a lot of issues between, tenants, ownership tenants in the duplexes. So that's created a lot of problems that they didn't want to have to deal with in this next project. And the Great Barrington Housing Authority said, no, we want to squeeze as many people as we can on this footprint. And you have to make some of those, units, duplexes, basically. And so, I really want to say that, something like that would create a certain amount of movement. So, Pinewoods people that live here now eventually want to move and buy their own home. And so the more movement, or if we had another space to go to, that would mean more families could be moving into Pinewoods and getting their themselves together to get to a financial point where they can buy a home in the $250,000 range, which is affordable. That's a realistic number for affordable housing, I think, for working class people. I've had many discussions with the tenant members, about what's affordable, and $250,000 with two working, incomes in the household is a realistic number. So if we had somewhere to go, then that would create a certain amount of movement out of Pinewoods, and that would allow other people to move to Stockbridge, and get their foot in the door, get a job, a local job, whether they're teachers or municipal employees, like Patrick said. And, again, then, they would have somewhere else to go once they get to a point. But I really think a project like that needs to happen in Stockbridge, a piece of land where they build a community of small homes that people can purchase and then be paying taxes into the system. And it creates, again, more opportunities, affordable housing opportunities. They're not subsidized necessarily. I mean, maybe they are subsidized. The project is subsidized through federal grants and that nature. But
Okay.
that's something that I would see in
Thank
Stockbridge.
you, Joanna.
We got it.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. That's important.
Just a little clarification on, one, we are and have been in conversations both with properties that are in tax title, as well as some small parcels that the generosity of some local players may become available we're absolutely looking at partnering to build affordable homes in the habitat model that would involve homeownership. I will say that that model includes a voucher system, not a voucher, but a lottery system that is available to people in the region. So it's not like it's not like it's kind of it's one of those things where they vet every candidate. And I believe on Grove Street right now, which is just being finished, there's nearly 100 candidates for that one house. So let's just be realistic that, it's a complex issue, and I think homeownership is great. And one of the great things about homeownership is it qualifies you on the day that you're chosen. But then until you sell that unit and the resale is limited, the family can actually make more, unlike a rental where your rental where your income is limited and evaluated every year. So I think there's a lot of truth to that, but we're walk before we run.
That and the cost to build these things is so much higher than, it's unfortunate. The building costs have gone up, more than doubled, I would say, since COVID happened. We have fewer people building, and the price of the land and the price of building, it makes it very, very, I don't know how you build a $250,000 home.
Well, you don't, but you.
And it's certainly not going to be standalone. It's not, you look at residential neighborhoods that we used to have, and they were, you still had noise. You still had, whether you're connected by a wall or not, you still have noise. People make noise in their houses. We have quiet enjoyment, laws that cut you off at 10 o'clock, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Sometimes James Taylor shows up and plays across from your house and there's more noise.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
it's not the same as sharing walls though. And it's not a feeling of like, this is my home, I own every square inch of it. It's a very different feeling. Like I said, I'm not going to get on the hook for any mortgage to share a wall with somebody. I want to own my own standalone building. The other thing that, and I'll just throw this out there that I've been researching, and I don't know, I know Massachusetts zoning laws basically don't allow, for example, off the grid homes or alternative building homes, whereas in Connecticut, they, you could go build a straw bale home, which is actually very energy efficient. And it's an alternative building style. And, I actually went and looked at a house a friend of mine was renting down there as a straw bale home, and I couldn't believe it was made of straw. It cost $75,000 for her to build. There are other building styles that are non-traditional that are very economical, but the problem is Massachusetts does not allow these types of homes to be built.
Right. They probably don't meet code, and codes become stronger and stronger, and there's not much we can do about that. And plus, it's going to become more and more green energy focused because of the way the planet is going. So, and that costs more too.
Straw homes are extremely efficient.
Come on, this is taking us off track here. Come on, we have work to do.
Yeah.
Straw homes isn't going to get us there.
So could I do the last slide here?
Yes.
And then we could kind of summarize where I think we are or are not. Again, do we want to identify housing needs or options specifically for disabled? And this could be in the form of identifying funding that would allow people who own a home now who need to make renovation, changes so it's accessible
Block grant kind of stuff.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Or it could be creating housing that is specifically designed for people with disabilities. So what is your
I think
sense?
the renovation of the home especially for seniors who have extended needs is perfect. I think that we've done a fantastic. We haven't. I think Riverburgh does a fantastic job meeting some needs of this community, and to the degree that a private enterprise wanted to expand that, of course, none of us would oppose it. But that's going to be driven by a private enterprise, I think.
I'm not sure what you mean, a special development that,
Yeah, if somebody wanted to convert another house into a group home, like similar to Riverbrook, great. But I don't know that we are gonna,
Make that a priority.
or just be involved in other than supporting them however we can.
there's a pretty broad range
Reacting.
of disabilities that range from intellectual disabilities to, a broken leg temporarily, where you're in a wheelchair for a couple of months, or on a scooter or something. I don't know where the data came from other than just elderly, and so therefore, since have an older population, therefore a higher percentage of residents are going to have some disability issues. Is that an extrapolation that she made?
Her data was, I think, from the census, and but I'll check that, in terms of how many people are disabled right now.
Yeah, wasn't there a slide said 20% of?
Yes, and the range of disabilities is everything from mobility to mental disability to, hearing.
But some of it changes year to year, and much of this data is extrapolated based on the size of the community and sort of like, coming from disparate sources that may not take into account our age or the vagaries of this market. I think we should be a little bit careful with statistics.
Well, anything that gets developed is going to be ADA compliant.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have to list this as a specific goal. I think it's starting to get into the weeds a little bit. I
don't think we should.
Hate the units. That's what.
I don't think we should support tree houses. That's one thing.
And the Massachusetts version of ADA is more stringent than the federal version of ADA. I remember that when I was doing some renovations and doing some building for my hospital. And we built it according to ADA, and then Massachusetts came in and said we had to rip it out and do it even more stringently. So there's, I do think that, anything that we facilitate building should have options for people that have, various forms of disability. I'm not sure how you build other than a place like Riggs, I'm not sure how you build a housing structure that is appropriate for the mentally disabled. And you're talking about physical disabilities mostly.
I think those are pretty much, I think they are covered by the Breen Center. They're covered by, I think that's their niche. I don't think that's our niche.
Right, exactly. I think that's,
Yeah.
But I think physical disabilities with ramps and making sure that the showers and the bathrooms have bars, that people can support themselves and
Right.
single level, ground level access, I think is something that needs to be incorporated into any housing that we facilitate.
So let me ask a practical question, and we're going to keeping this in an hour and a half, and I know we lost 15 minutes because of the start. How do we see the actual event being kind of presented?
you're talking about the workshop?
Workshop, yeah.
Well, I'll start it off by saying, I think that the presentation, first of all, I would like to get some response to Jan's presentation.
A number of us.
Well, Jan presented the accumulation of all the ideas that we have so far. I think we should have some sense that this is the type of presentation that we want to make. Is everybody in on that boat? If so, there's some refinement and some data checking and the most important thing is how we summarize the last few, this discussion. And I think that's the most raw, still needs a little more refinement.
Right.
But the main ideas are, if I could summarize that we are basically all in agreement that we would like in an ideal world to create some more housing to see more housing created in our town that really serves all the populations, because we see needs both for the younger people, middle people with families, and the seniors. And I think these final pages ought to articulate that we really see needs in all the age groups and income groups. That's a more idealistic, statement. But whether we can do it or not, I think we could say that the data shows that we're, far behind the eight ball in having enough housing in our town.
Well, I would summarize it slightly differently, which is, I think based on the conversation we've had today, it's really that we want to focus on housing options for people in that middle age, middle income bracket, so that they have options that they could afford. And also to look at what other options there might be for seniors, either to do age in place that would identify funding options for renovations as needed, or smaller places that may be where they could downsize to a smaller place and remain in Stockbridge.
So you would say,
Those would be the two main areas of focus for, if you want to say, priority housing needs.
so you would not have the focus on the 18 to 20 or sub?
Was it age or is it affordable?
Right.
Yeah. Basically, you're saying that you want us to kind of be an advocate for market forces, aligning zoning with market forces so we can build more private sector housing. I mean, I think that's kind of what you're saying, because it's not subsidized. It's, it's not going to reach the lower end of the market.
And not, again, as you're saying, not talking about revamping the entire town, obviously.
Right.
But we all want to keep the nature of the town the way it is. So it might be looking at
Right.
one project somewhere located.
But to be,
Let's not,
Project could
let's not forget
one
that,
project could get us to the 10% I was talking about. One project at like the Levan property, for example, could be 40 units. That's what they said. That's what Berkshire Housing said. So, are we really looking at a strategy that involves affordable as well as aligning our zoning with our needs, or is it just the latter?
are you saying private versus subsidies or?
I'm saying the versus is the issue for me, not the
Diverse is the.
versus, private versus subsidies.
Well,
Saying we could
you
do
need
one, we
both.
could focus on one, we could prioritize one, or we could prioritize the other, or we could have two tracks, which says, for the missing middle or for
Why are
the,
they mutually exclusive?
that's what I mean. That's my point.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
I don't either, but I'm addressing what what the comment on the table that we met our 10% criteria.
Yeah.
we may have met our time.
I think in what I said.
Parallel tracks.
I think in what I said, Patrick, it's not excluding the affordable housing. It's saying the focus or the priority need is for those particular age groups and portions of the population. And so one way to do that might be through the technical affordable housing. One way may be through private, investment and private development. So I'm not suggesting ruling out either one of them.
Okay.
Okay. But I guess what I'm reacting to on the other one is not to set as a priority to achieve 10% of the entire housing inventory as affordable in the technical term.
Mark, did you have a point?
Well, I just, a couple of things, quick things. Fred Clark from Great Barrington said if you're going to undertake a big technically affordable place, it's like 40, 45 units to work economically. That was one point that he's made, having gone through this a couple of times down in GB. Also, Carolyn Valley of Habitat said that the way they're pulling off this thing over on North Plain Road is the town is giving them the land, the infrastructure, plumbing, the water, sewer, power lines, whatever. And then they're building the units, I think 20 standing homes, 2 and 3 bedroom units. and they're going to sell them for around $250,000 to the buyers, and then somehow they make up the difference. It costs more than $250 to build it, but given all the land and infrastructure, if you pull those costs out,
It's a
they can
huge
build it.
difference.
So they somehow come up with a difference, and I wasn't quite sure how she's coming up with that cash. But that's a way to create, at least, that's how she's operating. So it makes it affordable, $250. I think Joanna said that was the number they liked it, that her over time.
Price is set by what 30% AMI is. The price is not, the price is not set at 250. The price is set at back out what that family's earning. And then you add in the insurance and the taxes or whatever else they're gonna have to pay. And then you come up with a number. And because interest rates are so much higher now, the number that they're coming up with is lower than it was 2 years ago, that the family's, mortgage portion of those homes would be. But it's not like regular housing where you build it and you set a price, and this price is based on the family's income that's selected to be in the lottery to be acquiring that house.
Those are based on formulas where market rates are based on your cost plus a profit. And,
Or not in affordable space.
no, I said the private.
Yeah.
In the private sector. I personally don't think that having 100% subsidized, I use the word subsidized to mean what the capital A affordable means. Because communities ought to be mixed, I feel, to be really successful in the long term. Because you can see all the problems we have at Pine Woods because there isn't enough money to maintain them. And 20 and 30 years later, you have this massive problem. If you have a mix of incomes in one unit, and it's slightly more difficult to do, but in the long term, it's much more viable.
Let's make it practical as we wrap
Which
this
is
up.
why I said I don't know that they're mutually exclusive.
And I don't think you're looking at just housing developments. I think we're looking at the town in terms of mix. And I think what we're seeing is it's changing.
So here's some practical questions. Elm Court. Elm Court is going to come to the town with a special permit request. Elm Court now with the residential inclusionary bylaw, as part of that request, will likely need to build or contribute 6 units. Based on what you're saying, and I'm not going to say what I agree with. And the 3 ways you could do that potentially are build them on site, build them at a different site, or pay into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I don't think we should answer this question now, but sometime soon, because we're getting a special permit, we should kind of have a thought as a group as to making a recommendation to the select board on where that negotiation occurs. All right. Then looking at a piece of land donated to the town. Let's say we have a piece of land donated to town that can support 6 to 12 units with a cost of probably 500 to 700,000 in infrastructure improvements to deliver, as Carolyn said, the land ready to go. What is our position on that subsidy? Even if the land's donated, we got to bring in water and sewer and cut the curbs and whatever. So, that sort of approach where we're leveraging a little bit of town money with a donation. That's another thing. Then we've got a couple of sites that are in terrible disrepair that involve tremendous amount of asbestos and lead paint, and they're an eyesore, and there's a lot of acreage. We could do something scale on it, but just getting water and sewer there and clearing the land is maybe a $3 million nut. Okay, and that's the hardest thing to fund. All right, maybe Smitty gets you a grant as kind of like an earmark. If you're lucky, like he did for Great Barrington, he's great. Don't get me wrong, but it's just there's not so many of those, that you can kind of slip into the annual budget of the legislature. And but if we want to make that a priority, should we be working on that? We've got very practical options in Stockbridge I would throw out to the group that starting to understand based on kind of the feedback how it specifically relates to our actual on-the-ground options of how we might proceed would be really quite helpful. So.
But I think that we can accomplish at least one or perhaps two of the options that you're talking, that you have.
And we can do all of them, personally, if we want to. I mean, if the town has the desire to.
If, therefore out of this discussion in these final charts, which is, and I'm not sure that when we get done, that maybe there'll just be one or two pages.
Yeah.
At the end. And hopefully those one or two pages will be written in such a way to spur the discussion, Patrick, that we'll get some consensus.
Yeah. Well, at least we'll have the issues out there.
But it would be good to have, if we can get a group of thoughtful people to come to the meeting, to our workshop meeting, that we could have that discussion about the mix and the type and
And the trade-offs, like looking at what school budgets might be, I mean, I think it's important that we have a candid back and forth that talks about a lot of what these issues are. Yeah. All right.
but how we're going to, let's now address how we're going to handle this, which I would like to make a recommendation that, first of all, Jan's chair of this, that she lead it, if you're in agreement, and that those of us on the board take, sections of it. And then Patrick, perhaps, who's our most political person here, lead the discussion.
Wait, say again?
That you lead the discussion part.
Yeah. I think that the present, personally, I think that we should limit discussion of the slides and try to keep this presentation to 10 or 12 minutes, which is a presentation by the board. And I'm not thinking me, by one or two members of the board, where we walk through the key points of the slide and talk about kind of the demographics and the information. Then I think we need a facilitated session to ask questions, and I'd be happy to be part of one or two of us, or there are two or more of us who want to be part of that facilitated discussion, because sometimes I know more about the other aspects of town that are going on than some other, than just because I'm involved in many things. But I think that it's, in both cases, I'd rather be a resource to answer some questions if I'm the only one who can, rather than sort of, I think it's important that the board can do this.
So, Jan, are you
What do you guys think?
in leading the presentation?
Yeah.
And how many people do you think you could do the whole thing?
We'll give and take it.
See this,
Take works really well.
I could see this dividing up with three presenters.
Yeah.
Going back to slide one, I mean, some kind of introduction, here's why we're here and what we're attempting to do today, and the purpose of the production plan. So there's sort of an opening thing. Then you could get into some of the demographics, current housing, population changes, declining student population, aging population, wealth, poverty. Then you get into housing itself, slow growth in housing and low vacancy rates, price changes, not affordable, housing costs difficult for many residents, median income, current housing environment, and then priority needs, could be another person even. But it does seem to break down into some categories there. And from the audience standpoint, as long as the transition is made quickly, having another person step in who's sort of a master of those 3 or 4 slides and laying those out with a little commentary as needed and move on to the next. Get the sense of the board presenting this as a group and each person having 3 or 4 slides or 5 slides that they.
And Mark's experience in broadcast gives him my question for you is,
I'm not going to be here that day.
Our God.
No.
I'm in Cape Cod.
No.
I said that.
Oh, that's right. Oh,
You should give us advice though. Because one of the things I was thinking is sort of the similar to how commentary happens in a sports event on its broadcast. You can have the person calling the plays who's maybe reading the slides and talking about that. But then sort of the commentary that might the nuance of the slide could be the partner who's presenting. It's like, sort of, you covered the 4 points in the slide and then you say, and here's an example of that, a real world example in Stockbridge that, you know what I mean? It's like kind of keep it interesting, but keep it to 10 or 12 minutes. Really, I think it's like a TED Talk. TED Talks are 10 minutes long. You keep it to a TED Talk and then let the thing have a life of its own in terms of how it all rolls out. But I think,
It was a really bad choice. Is there any way we can fly you back?
no, we're going to do like a man behind the curtain thing. I'll be like a screen like the Wizard of Oz.
Plans have been nailed down
Yeah,
for, and we're staying with people and
Yeah.
it's going to be.
And it's a 10-hour commute back here. It's like, especially in the summer, it's crazy. On a Monday.
Ken,
Oh, yeah. So just leave early on a Monday because nobody else does that from the Cape.
Right, at 8:00,
Ken,
sit on the bridge.
how about Ken?
Okay,
Oh,
so
we had to fly it back. Do you want to ride?
And Michaela, we're missing
loves
two
the
people.
flag.
Michaela won't be here either.
Right.
So, well, it sounds like,
I think we should let Jan design who's going to speak for what and reach out and let people know what their sections are. We have a list. Michaela's probably going to be in Nantucket because she's working.
Yes.
Mark's going to be in the Cape. And I like those 3-pound lobsters. Those really good ones.
can bring
The
back.
affordable lobster program. It's over 30% of my income, so I can't.
It'll be like the horse's head. You could leave it at the house, not in the bed.
Okay.
And so, you've got 4 folks to work with, and I would try to, my personal goal would be or suggestion would be all 4 of you should kind of take part in this. And I think when it comes to the questions and answers, I'll join in to agree that some of the questions are,
and keep in mind, we also have Karen.
Yeah.
Be there and can help facilitate some of
she's
it.
also great at commentary because she's got how I'd use Karen is she has so much experience in other communities in Massachusetts.
Exactly.
And I would encourage her to pepper the dialogue with, well, here's what Wellfleet did, or here's what Chelsea did, or here's what, Tolland did or whatever.
I think that realistically, if we do it, I think it's a great format. It's not longer than 12 to 15 minutes.
2 minutes a slide, that's the.
You don't have to,
Slides.
just reading through them. You're not,
1.5, 2 minutes a slide.
you're reading through them, you give a little bit of information that backs it up and you go to the next. They're not
Yeah.
asking questions.
And we're not doing dialogue, we're not doing back and forth.
Go back.
If you're having Karen make comments about it,
Not yet.
are you saying having Karen just in the facilitation?
I think more is when questions come up and bringing perspective of how other towns solved a specific problem is a great way to, use her. But I think it's up to you. Yeah, you can't go wrong.
Love the idea that let Jan make all the decisions.
Oh, yeah. Here's the
Okay, so I'll be reaching out to each of you over the next few days. Let me just say, the press release went out in the Stockbridge updates on the 1st. I'll see that it's also on the 15th.
Got a mention this morning.
Good. And I think Michael is printing some of the flyers. You already took some around, didn't you?
I put one up on Elm Street.
No, I haven't seen them. So
Okay.
Can we get them from him on our
Yes,
way out?
Yes, today. And so we need to have a couple volunteers to put those around in various parts of town.
How many do you know?
Well, I asked him to bring 10 of them. So if we each took a couple and find somewhere to.
Well, let's just figure out where they go and get them.
Michael's also already contacted one.
Joanna puts one up at Pinewoods and Heaton Court.
Transfer station.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Transfer
That's a good
station
one.
is a very good one.
Library,
Library.
wine cellar.
So Michael has already sent the press release to one paper and he's contacting the other one today. He's also going to be sending out a little notice on the community alert. Kind of,
Oh, he can?
he can.
Oh,
So
good.
Do that?
Good, good,
do
good.
that.
Is that phone thing?
Yeah.
Maybe you don't want him to do that.
I don't have a policy. I just know we often limit it to actual,
This is a very, this is a very
if you want to use it to promote things, I think it's great.
There's an emergency alert and also a community alert.
Oh, okay, good.
Different, but
Let's say housing has reached
Very
an emergency
important.
stage.
It's very important at this point. We wouldn't be here if it
I'll
wasn't.
take the transfer station and the post office.
Post office doesn't,
Accept flyers anymore.
What's that?
post office doesn't have a board anymore.
Right.
No?
We have the Glendale.
Once they added the
mail.
Glendale,
But you know what? I can make you a sign and you can hang out in front.
thanks so
I've
much.
done that.
We
Great way
could,
to meet people. Not all of them like you, but it's a great way to meet
Laurel
people.
Hill has the box there. Maybe they would.
Yes. Right, right.
Okay.
Who do we know there?
I can't imagine.
Is that a motion to adjourn?
Do we,
Second.
just a second. Would everybody please stop at Michael's and
Call the
pick up
question.
two?
I'm gonna get
Call
two.
two, okay.
I'll take the transfer station. I'll figure out where to put the other one. If I can't put it in the post
Motion on the table. How's that for Robert's?
All right, a motion to adjourn, seconded, all those in favor?
Who seconded?
Thank you all.
Who seconded?
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Hi, Joanne.
Yeah.
Bye-bye, thanks for coming.